Hi everybody, I'm Bryan Mudd, a fan of South Plains politics. Here's your talking points for this week. A historic moment coming for the new Lubbock City Council when they're sworn in next week with a new look and a new point of view. And a lot of people still prefer the point of view of an attorney general who's under indictment and accused of abusing his office. We'll meet someone trying to change that.
From the studios of KAMC Television in Lubbock, your local election headquarters. This is Talking Points with Bryan Mudd.
Thanks for being with us. Also this week, power to the parents. The governor again this week told an audience he would support a plan to let parents use taxpayer money to help send their kids to non-public schools. He also says the legislature, though, will actually be the ones to do the dirty work to pay for that while still paying for public schools. Not easy, although some Republicans like that idea. That is, though, how a lot of campaigns go these days. Say the right things, figure it out later. Or don't figure it out, but say the right things. Meanwhile, what about the kids and teachers in the middle of all this? Our Daniel Menning takes a look.
Rodriguez says she's pleased with the progress since her son transitioned from a traditional public school to this charter school. She says the smaller class sizes made it an easy choice.
They just provide more opportunities than just a regular district school.
Parents get to decide.
Governor Greg Abbott says parents' choice is what he's all about this campaign season. That's why he's proposing school vouchers for any family that wants one.
Giving them the choice to send their children to any public school, charter school, or private school with state funding following the student.
The plan could have big financial effects on school districts that rely on student attendance numbers for funding. Mark Wiggins with the Association of Texas Professional Educators says Abbott's framing of vouchers as a parents' rights issue is misleading.
Let's talk about parents' rights under vouchers. Parents would surrender the right to run their child's school through an elected school board, the right to view curriculum, the right to demand open records, the right to accountability scores, not to mention federal rights for a disabled child, and private schools will still have the right to choose who they admit.
Vouchers have run into political opposition at the state capitol from rural lawmakers, both Democrat and Republican, who represent areas with few school options. Political science professor Dr. Richard Pineda says the governor is likely testing the voucher idea this election season in preparation for any future campaigns.
I think a lot of what you're seeing is the governor teeing up what his approach is going to be if and when he decides to run for the White House.
Morning. Pleased to be joined once again by Republican House District 84 candidate David Glasheen. Good to see you, my man.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, so the governor's talking about supporting private school vouchers or some sort of state support for private schools or something to that effect. Where do you stand on that, and how can that really be done and paid for in a time where it's already tough to pay for public schools?
You know, I support a parent's right to choose where their child goes to school in a system where the money follows the student. But my priority is supporting our public schools because we need parents to know what's going on in the classroom so they can make good choices about their children's education. And we also need to give our public school teachers the resources and the freedom that they need so they can really engage and challenge our students.
Funding is always an issue, though. You know, we've talked about a couple of other school funding options, one of them being some sort of marijuana legalization that would be taxed here in Texas. What's your thoughts on that?
Drug legalization is not the right way to go, and it's a net drag on our society.
Also, you know, it's been brought up again briefly, I think, in the last session about casino gaming in Texas in its many forms. Is that a viable solution in Texas? Because so much of that money is already going out of state.
No, it's really inconsistent with the values that we hold here in West Texas, and we don't want the negative side effects that come along with casino gambling.
Sure. You know, speaking of negative, everyone's seen the ads, and I know you have and have had to address some of that too. I'm going to give you an opportunity here to respond to some of that. The campaign, heavily funded by some Austin liberal attorney stuff. What's that all about?
Well, Carl Tepper is picking on my father, Kevin Glasheen, who is a lawyer in Austin. But you can look at our campaign finance reports, they're public records, you're not going to find his name on there. Yeah. He has been walking blocks for me, though.
Yeah, that's definitely true. We see the post and all that stuff. He's been out sweating a little bit. That David Glasheen guy never lifted a finger to help with Lubbock's abortion ban. What's that all about?
It's completely untrue, and Carl Tepper knows it. My wife, Mary, and I knocked on doors and walked blocks with Project Destiny to help pass Lubbock's historic pro-life ordinance, put up signs, and I even introduced Carl to my wife at the thank you dinner that Project Destiny held for volunteers. So I can't believe that he would spend money putting something on the air's way that he knows is completely false.
Yeah, I think you guys were even in my neighborhood at one point in time. I didn't see you, but I heard that. What are the talk that you haven't voted in several previous Republican primary elections over the last few years? Is that true, and what's the reasons for all?
Yeah, I've been criticized for not voting in Texas when I didn't live in Texas, but I've got a perfect voting record for my time that I lived here in Lubbock. And while I was on active duty in the military, I didn't engage in any partisan politics as the Department of Defense guidance suggests.
Yeah, sometimes they get a little testy with that kind of stuff. Since we last spoke, the latest home valuations have come out for property tax purposes. Average increase in Lubbock for some 16% for a lot of folks. Texans passed the two amendments to sort of help with all of that, but what more should the legislature be doing with this when they go back to Austin?
Those amendments that we passed are definitely going to help, but we still need to reform the property tax and appraisal system so that we can lower property taxes for homeowners. For example, on the appraisal system, there's not a level of transparency or accountability that we need. And part of my plan to solve that is to have the leadership of the appraisal districts be directly elected by the citizens. And that way the leadership won't be appointed by taxing entities like the cities and counties, because that's a little bit of a conflict of interest.
We've talked a lot for a long time about the situation at the border, and some people call it an invasion, but a lot of folks coming across the border in different ways. How do you plan to help work on at least having some sort of rule of law with people coming across the border?
Securing the border is a top priority for me because we have to secure the southern border in order to reduce the amount of crime we're experiencing. And where the federal government has failed us, we as a state have to step up. That's going to be a combination of building the border wall, having the right law enforcement that's manned, trained, and equipped for border security mission. And then we also have to follow it up with effective statewide prosecutions, especially of the leadership of the criminal organizations. And as a former prosecutor, I have the best skill set to secure the border.
There's been talk of maybe mobile prosecution units going down to the border and being ready for those kind of cases to move things through quickly. Is that a good idea?
Absolutely. Manpower is going to help both with the law enforcement and the prosecutions to get good outcomes and get the cases resolved quickly.
You excited to get this campaign to the finish line? It's been a busy campaign season for a lot of folks.
It has been busy, but I got to tell you, Brian, it's been fun. And my favorite thing about it has just been getting to talk to people one-on-one, whether I'm visiting on their doorstep or they call my cell phone and chat. It's been wonderful.
I know a lot of folks like to wait till toward the end to make their decisions. How can they find out more about the campaign?
You can find us on glasheenfortexas.com. You can find us on Facebook, and you can come visit us. One of our meet and greet events we'll have at 79th and University Rise and Shine Donuts Saturday, May 14th from 9 to 10:30.
He's a donut guy, so that's probably worth some votes for a lot of us here. That's definitely for sure. David Glasheen, best of luck to you on election night.
Thank you.
And coming up, the Lieutenant Governor on making Texas Tech part of the Permanent University Fund. And when we go back to the polls this month, local voters will choose a new judge for the County Court of Law number 2. We'll get to talk to candidate Bob Nebb for 5 good minutes next on Talking Points.
You're watching Talking Points, a focus on the political scene in Lubbock and across the South Plains.
And welcome back. Here's a look at some of the political headlines of the past week. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick in Lubbock this week, helping Dawn Buckingham's campaign for Texas Land Commissioner. Someone asked him about the possibility of cutting Texas Tech in on some of the billions of dollars in the Permanent University Fund. Right now, that fund comes from West Texas Oil and only goes to Texas A&M and the University of Texas. But Lubbock's representatives are trying to add Tech and other schools to that list.
We need to create a second PUF fund. I have an interim charge on that we're studying to create, and we've talked about this. I think there will be momentum in the next session to create a second PUF fund so that for all the schools that aren't in the current PUF fund, and I think we can get there.
But Mr. Patrick also says he's not yet sure where the money for a second fund will come from. Garza County officials say they plan to save the Dalby Prison in Post and all those jobs. Instead of closing next month, that facility will now become a state detention center and hold inmates from nearby counties that don't have enough room in their own jails. Federal Bureau of Prisons let their contract with a private company to run that prison expire, and Garza County leaders say this changeover will actually double the size of the prison to be able to hold more than 1,100 inmates. This Lubbock City Council wrapping up its current session this week with a couple of big items. One is final approval for the Lubbock County Health District, which will allow city and county leaders to better coordinate a response to public health threats like we saw with the COVID pandemic. There'll also be a new $11 million public health facility built with American Rescue Plan money and a new Board of Public Health, which will have members appointed by both the council and the county commissioners. The council also passed a resolution on the critical importance of the homeless situation in Lubbock. Last month's count found 259 people experiencing homelessness here. The city's already set aside $3.5 million of ARPA money for this issue, and this proclamation will create a new program that will allow them to access federal dollars to help with this as well from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. The next edition of Lubbock City Council will be sworn in on Tuesday afternoon over at Citizens Tower. New mayor, 3 new representatives of the council, 2 of them being women, meaning for the first time in our city, a majority of the council will be made up of women. Our Elizabeth Fitz found the 2 new ladies are looking forward to bringing their perspectives and cultural experience.
I'm a firm believer that if, I'm not invited to the table, I'll bring my own chair. And if I'm not invited or allowed to be a part of that table, I'll create my own.
And Christy Martinez Garcia plans to do just that when representing District 1. She says she overcame hurdles unique to minorities leading up to this point in her life.
The challenges definitely have made me, I think, more aware of the needs of the public, as well as more empathetic.
Incoming District 5 Councilwoman Dr. Jennifer Wilson says she also defied the odds.
I went to medical school as a single mother and worked very hard when lots of people told me there's no way you will ever do that. You will not survive that. You cannot do both. And I'm the type of person that says, well, watch me.
The 2 turning doubts into a reality and paving the way for generations to come.
And I think as moms and wives and professionals, we want to do our best. And, it was not an easy road to get here.
Women have historically been underrepresented in politics.
Representation matters. Lubbock now is 38% Hispanic, and I think it's important for them to see that someone like them, no matter what the role is committed to them.
Because without that representation, communities could be left behind.
I think that it's important for us to make sure that we are serving the underserved.
I am so excited to be part of the first female majority for council, and for them to be able to see that with hard work and dedication that anybody can do anything.
That is Elizabeth Fitz reporting. Let's spend 5 good minutes with candidate for Lubbock County Court at Law number 2, Attorney Bob Ned. Good to see you.
Good to see you. How you doing, Brian?
Man, we're hanging in there. We're trying to get through the weekend here. I think even more than most races, I think people don't really know their judge candidates particularly well. It's kind of just the way it goes for whatever reason. Tell folks about your background and your resume a little bit here.
Well, my background is, as you can tell from the accent, I wasn't born in Texas, but I got here as quick as I could. Matter of fact, I was just 20 years old when I met a little girl from Littlefield, and in exchange for a year in New Jersey while I finished college, I got a life sentence in Texas. I got the better deal. And together we've raised three good, beautiful children. We've got a son that's almost 40 years old. It's hard to believe. Out on the West Coast with 2 little boys. We've got a daughter with a little boy and a little girl out on the East Coast. Which is a bummer because I like to see my grandkids a little bit more often.
Good trip, though. Yeah.
It's a great trip. We just came back from Connecticut seeing these kids. I've got a daughter that's a nurse practitioner in Las Cruces. So the one that doesn't have kids is close by.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how that worked out. Got down here, I've been here in Lubbock for over 35 years, came out here to go to law school at Texas Tech, and have never left. I've found it to be not only a good place to raise my kids and my family, but a wonderful place to practice law. Probably the best place in Texas to practice law.
I'm with you. Does your experience as an attorney and the things that you litigate relate to the types of cases that you would see in the County Court at Law number 2?
Sure. The County Court at Law number 2, it's a court of general jurisdiction, which doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot for viewers. It's the court that you're most likely to have a normal citizen enter. It's family law cases, which could be child custody, divorce cases, child support, children's protective services. A lot of times grandparents get caught up in that when their kids have had a little bit of a rough time and they're taking care of the grandkids. It's misdemeanor criminal cases, just, golly, so many things are against the law these days that it's hard to run afoul of it. I was talking to one of my interns today. He goes, well, he was really annoyed when he was putting out some signs and they were gone and replaced by somebody else the next day. He goes, that's rude. I said, it's also a misdemeanor.
Yeah.
You know, it's contested probate and guardianship cases. It's smaller level civil litigation up to $250,000. And when the government tries to take your property away without just compensation, it's where you go to get that just compensation. Yeah. So it really is the type of things that everybody sees.
You know, constitutional conservative is something we see from a lot of certain candidates, yourself included and all that. Explain to folks what that means and how it relates specifically to what you do.
What it means to me is that our law is founded on two things in the United States. The Bible, and particularly the Ten Commandments. If you look at the Ten Commandments, the thou shalt nots are all against the law, and the thou shalts, if you don't do them, that's against the law. And the Constitution of the United States, and of course the Constitution of the state of Texas. Now, if you start fiddling with those two terribly much, you start getting really, really strange results in the law and in the courts. So as a constitutional conservative, somebody that believes in the absolute immutability of the Ten Commandments, and that the Constitution can only be changed by we the people that created the Constitution. If I understand those two as being consistent, then I'm going to follow those lodestars as I'm on the bench.
Does that fall into the category of things that we see from judge candidates as well, people talking about them when they talk about legislating from the bench and how you try not to do those kind of things?
Absolutely, Brian. Absolutely it does. There's not really as much room for that to happen on a county court at law level. However, things don't get to appellate courts and things don't get to Supreme Courts unless trial court judges made decisions that are having people scratch their heads.
Right. Talk about your motivation to run for this job. And you're probably in a situation where you could keep going and do okay for yourself and your family and everything else. Why take this kind of leap forward?
Well, my wife asked me why I would work so hard to take a pay cut as well. And the fact of the matter is it did not occur to me to run for a judicial bench. It has never occurred to me. If everybody wanted to run, then every single election there would be 500, 600, 700 lawyers running, but there's not. My motivation, the best way I can say it, is kind of that voice in the middle of the night that wakes you up and you start hearing things that you don't want to do, but you're going to do it anyway. And you start talking to people that you trust, my spouse, my employer, some good close friends, and you pray about it. And when the answer comes and the answer is consistent and the answer is always yes, you have to do it.
Yeah. Lubbock County Court at Law candidate for judge, OpNet. Good luck to you.
Thank you, Brian.
Appreciate you coming on.
Appreciate you, man.
And coming up, another statewide candidate visit to Lubbock this week, George P. Bush, pulling no punches on his feelings about the current Attorney General and why he's the better person for the job. That's next on Talking Points. Current Texas Land Commissioner and Republican candidate for Attorney General George P. Bush stopped in Lubbock this week. He met with folks from the Republican National Hispanic Assembly about his ideas for West Texas before that runoff vote with incumbent Attorney General Ken Paxton. Paxton on Chad Hasty's radio show in March called this election, quote, the end of the Bush dynasty. His opponent obviously disagrees.
Well, that's pretty rich coming from a 22-year swamp creature who's spent an entire career around the Capitol. And it's not conservative to cheat on your wife. It's not conservative to abandon the Constitution. And it's not conservative to accept bribes from financial donors. So he's going to, after 22 years, attack me and distort my record rather than actually running on something. And that's what I'm going to communicate with voters tonight, talking about securing the border, real ideas to protect our law enforcement.
George P. is the son of former Florida governor and presidential candidate Jeb Bush and nephew of former President George W. Bush. And in the end, more than policy, overcoming a Republican public that seems tired of his family name seems to be George P.'s biggest problem here. But he's certainly not talking like a candidate that many would think would be more moderate. KAMC's Maggie Glenn has a profile.
George P. Bush alleges incumbent Ken Paxton's own legal troubles are keeping him from fully defending Texas as our state's top lawyer.
If you're facing your own legal difficulties, how can you address the criminal issues that are facing our state.
While Paxton has spent plenty of time along our state's southern border, being the legal arm for Governor Greg Abbott's Operation Lone Star, Bush says it hasn't been enough.
First and foremost, we need to secure our borders. Instead of sending information packets, we need to send lawyers and paralegals to help our farmers and ranchers either build Texas Wall and or prosecute under Governor Abbott's executive order.
That executive order allows DPS troopers to arrest migrants caught on private property for criminal trespassing, and it's overwhelming criminal justice systems in border towns.
Every county sheriff and DA that I talk to, or even border troops that I interact with, they say that the state of Texas is not legally prosecuting criminal trespassing claims quickly enough.
Bush says he would send mobile prosecution units to help.
Similar to a military deployment, of deploying whatever we have here in Austin to help our border communities.
Beyond the border, Bush says he will also focus on protecting free speech, specifically for conservatives, if elected.
I believe that the First Amendment has been manipulated for the left but not the right, whether it's on college campuses or social media, cancel culture that we're seeing, where if you are a conservative and you put out a controversial thought, suddenly your career is done.
In Austin, Maggie Glenn, KAMC News.
And Maggie will be back with a final word. Next week, more on our local runoff races as we edge closer to our second election this month. Hey, make sure to send us a comment on our KAMC News Facebook page and everythinglubbock.com. Just click Weekly Features and Talking Points to stream this and many of our past shows. That's all of our time for all of us on Talking Points. We thank you for watching, and we'll see you right here again next week.